Hello, everyone. I'm the person who made the page. Okay, so we have a Michael Jordan fan who wants to go on. He's from i80sportsblog.com. His name is Paul 80. He has Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time, and he would like to explain why Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time. So let me put him on. Hey, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Okay, so you have Michael Jordan as the number one NBA player of all time. Please feel free to explain if you like.
I absolutely do, and it's a conclusion I've come to over a period of years. It wasn't the other way around where I saw Michael Jordan, was captivated, and thought, wow, he's the best player ever, bar none, shut brain off, this is it. It's literally become, it's something I came to over a lot of time of watching basketball and writing about it for over 20 years. And I guess the first thing that I'd like to establish, and if this isn't cool, let me know, but greatest. Greatest is such an ambiguous term. Is there a specific metric? Is there one thing that we're looking at? Or are we just looking at the accumulation of the whole and going with the broad spectrum greatest term?
If you have concluded that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time, and you have concluded that you could prove that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time, you can go over whatever you like.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to get context, because in any sort of greatest conversation, particularly greatest NBA player of all time, context is so important. Because you're somewhere out there, you've got a 75-year-old man listening who's sold that George Mikan is the greatest NBA player of all time, and he's not going to take no for an answer. So context in era of play is significant, and so that's the first place I'd start.
So would you agree that it is possible that George Mikan is the number one NBA player of all time?
I'm open to that, yes.
Okay.
Again, I'm not bar none, got to be Jordan or nothing guy, but I do think after everything I've considered that he is the greatest, and here's why. The first area, or first point I'd start with is the era and timing of his arrival in the NBA. So when he came into the league, you had Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were essentially dueling from the time he got there, and had brought the league out of a real dark place. And Jordan, in his early years, helped them do that. You know, it was seen as a drugged out, cocaine frenzied league, and there weren't a lot of players that fans could relate to, because players themselves were so distant from the paying customer that there was a lot of dissent. Nobody wanted to go to an NBA game.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. Your points are true, but I don't agree with the part where fans are not relating with the NBA stars, because there were lots of NBA fans who could relate with the NBA stars. And even if you do not agree with that, there were lots of other professional team sports then where some of the fans could not relate with some of the stars.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. I'll give you that one in terms of relatability. In terms of era of play, it's significant when he came to the league, because the change of the pace of play, the change of the game that Magic and Larry had started, Michael Jordan came in and helped evolve it even further.
How so?
I think that with Magic and Larry, we're seeing a more fundamentally solid, below the rim type of game. And I also think that in terms of athleticism, if those two were the forebears of the modern athletic player, Jordan was the absolute perfect evolution of that player.
There were other high flyers that were similar to Michael Jordan.
Well, you could talk about David Thompson or Dr. J or any ABA style players, absolutely.
Elgin Baylor, Connie Hawkins.
Absolutely. I mean, you could even make an argument for Oscar Robertson in that vein. But in terms of a combination of everything preceding him mixed with the perfect athletic genetic package and an absolute mastery of fundamentals, I think Jordan supersedes those other names.
So those things can be applied to some of the other stars.
You could, absolutely. But then if you get away from that, again, greatest is so ambiguous. Let's look at that. Let's say David Thompson and Michael Jordan are equal pound for pound, or even Dr. J. I guess if you want to take it a step further, I'd point to championships.
Why?
Because isn't championship, at least in some regard, a measure of a player's ultimate impact?
Sure, but it doesn't mean that you rank that star over all the other stars.
Well, I think it's one metric that you have to take into consideration. I agree. There's no one thing that does it. But I'm going to stack up a few other metrics for you here, or potential considerations. I'm going to call them metrics for want of a better term, but essentially varying factors or silos, if you will, of why I think Michael Jordan is the greatest.
Now, I understand that you have other things, but why is rings one of those things?
Because if you're going to talk about the greatest in anything, you have to consider the ultimate metric of success for any endeavor. Bill Gates could be the richest guy in the world, but if he hadn't built a company, if he inherited all that money from his dad rather than building a company, would that make him the greatest businessman of all time? I mean, you could say from a revenue standpoint, he's in that class, but it's not the same.
Okay, so are you a baseball fan?
Yes.
Okay, is Babe Ruth the number one baseball player of all time?
I think he is.
Okay, does he have the most World Series?
No, he doesn't, but he has a fair amount. And again, it's the full body of work. It isn't just one metric.
I understand, but then I still question, why should that rings thing be there? Because one guy doesn't win a ring. You need a squad to win.
True.
You can dominate any professional team sport all day, every day. You could lose all day, every day. You need a squad to win. So, for example, if George Gervin does what he's supposed to do, but he doesn't have a squad that wins, why would you rank another star over him? That's just one example. There's more, but you get the point.
Sure. The Iceman's a good example of that. But why should it detract from somebody's greatness that they have won?
You're taking what the team has done, and then you're ranking that star as the number one star. Think of it like this. If you play basketball, if you are the star on your team, and there's another team that plays your team, and there's a star on that team, right? And let's say you were the best player, the best, but the other team beat your team. Does that now mean that that star is better than you?
That's a valid point. I've never been a big fan of that. But here's what I will say regarding Jordan and the championships. It's an important metric discussing greatness in any field of endeavor. I truly think that that's important to consider. But to further your point, another thing that's appealing to Jordan, or about Jordan as a player and just his career, is the way it started out for him in his career. We got to see the evolution of a score-first, single, essentially one-man team, him and Orlando Woolridge, maybe a couple other guys, Steve Coulter, a few random guys in those early Bulls teams, and they were not a good team. But Jordan had had a significant amount of individual achievements, including a scoring title,
but you contradicted yourself now. If you are going to go by what he did in the 1980s, then the contradiction is, if you told me that the most important thing is winning and you shouldn't take away from the rings, well, Michael Jordan didn't win. So you can't, what you guys do is you cherry pick things. You go, well, winning is most important, but I'm also going to include the statistics from the times he lost. So then you can, by that logic, you can include statistics from other stars when they lost, but you don't do that because you conclude that Michael Jordan is the number one NBA player of all time.
I like your line of thinking, but what I'm saying is, so he did all the individual things that everybody gets so excited about, right? But what's truly cool and exciting about Michael Jordan's career is the evolution from that one-man team to what he became with the Bulls as a member of a team that ultimately had the most success when there was more than just him performing at a high level. So I think that, and there's a lot of players we've already named, George Gervin being one, David Thompson, that never were able to do that literally stayed at a certain plateau their entire career, high performing for sure, but definitely never evolved. And I think one of the things that makes Michael Jordan so unique and great is his ability to play both roles.
So on the one hand, you're acknowledging that they're stars. You're acknowledging they play well, and I'm sure you know they have the statistics. So what are they doing that's not evolving, and how is Michael Jordan so different when it comes to his evolution?
Because because you learn how to work within the team structure while still being individually productive, while also attaining the ultimate in team success.
So do you think Michael Jordan is the number one leader of all time or the number one team player of all time?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
No, you should know. It should be no. He's not. Come on.
Well, how do you define leadership?
That's a good point. That's a good question. So it's tough to define. So because there's no factual way to prove who is the number one leader, and maybe there's no factual way to prove who's the number one team player, then you shouldn't use these things as why Michael Jordan's the number one player. You shouldn't be confused about it because there's no way to prove it. Plus, the other thing you have to consider, I would like to think that you know that Magic Johnson is a better leader or a better team player. I'd like to think that you know John Stockton is a better leader, better team player. I'd like to think that you know Jerry West is a better leader, better team player. And there's more examples, but you get the point.
But leader and team player, you're using those terms interchangeably without really defining how you come to that. What does it mean? How do you gauge leadership?
Well, as I said, there's no way to factually prove it. I did acknowledge that. There's
right.
No way. But if you want some examples, I'll give you some examples. So, for example,
but here's a question:
Sure.
How could you say that Magic Johnson or John Stockton or Jerry West are better leaders than Michael Jordan? I just don't understand it.
I understand. I easily. Well, number one, when you have people who don't care about statistics and want to get their teammates involved, when you pass more, when you have a pass-first mentality like Magic Johnson, John Stockton, that makes you a better leader and a better team player. When you don't do things like punch people in the face, and I could give you more examples, but you get the point.
I see where you're going with that, but that's highly subjective.
Yeah, sure. No, you're right. It's not a factual thing, as I've acknowledged. So at the very least, you should not even be open to the possibility Michael Jordan is the best leader and team player of all time. And if you think it's a subjective thing, I would like to think you can find examples of when another star is a better leader than Michael Jordan or a better team player than Michael Jordan.
Oh, I'm sure, all these guys have to play at optimal levels to be even in a conversation like this, right?
Oh, what do you mean?
So from a leadership standpoint, that was one of the main takeaways that I took from the Bulls series on Hulu here recently. They really delved into his leadership style and how it wasn't for everybody, but it worked. It had positive results. So leadership, everybody responds differently to different styles of being managed. So some people do well by a passive-aggressive or passive leader. Other people need to have a vocal sort of micromanager to be successful. So leadership, I don't know if he is or not. I'd say he's highly regarded and showed that with success.
I'm not claiming Michael Jordan has no leadership qualities or no team player qualities. I'm questioning, like when I asked you, do you think he's the number one leader and team player of all time? You're like, I don't know. And then number two, why it seems like on the one hand, there are other stars who are better leaders and better team players, but it doesn't seem like you rank them higher than Michael Jordan.
Well, how do you know that Magic Johnson and John Stockton were nice all the time? I mean, Stockton is one of the most reputed, notoriously dirty, mouthy players on the floor ever, and there's no way Magic is just smiling all the time. We've all watched enough basketball to know that he's a passionate leader just like Michael Jordan.
But remember, I'm not disputing that they never did anything negative. My dispute is who is a better leader and a better team player. So for all I know, John Stockton and Magic Johnson could be psychotic people who kill animals for fun. I have no idea what they do in the background. But we have to go by what we know. And so far, most of the evidence out there point out that these guys are leaders and team players. And then the example you gave about being dirty, John Stockton being a dirty player, if he is dirty, I'm not even claiming he's dirty or he's not, but if that's your point, that example applies to him being dirty to his opponents. So he could be a nice leader and team player to his squad and then play differently with other guys, his opponents.
Well, we'll never know what he said during a timeout to Howard Isley or Craig Ostertag or any of those guys. And, the leadership, and just to clear up, I didn't say didn't know about Michael Jordan being the greatest leader of all. This is a conversation about the greatest player. I think his leadership qualities are on par with anybody you would term a great leader.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I think his leadership qualities, not only, it's just not my opinion. Not only do I think he's not one of the top leaders or one of the top team players, he has been criticized over the years as being a ball hog, as someone who can't win because he scores too much, as being a guy who doesn't get his teammates involved enough. And there are more examples, but you get the point. This is not even like something that's usually disputed, other than maybe some Michael Jordan fans.
Right. I agree. And those are all great points, and that's common knowledge. I will absolutely concede that to you. But what I'm saying, in hindsight, looking at the full tapestry of his career, in the latter stages of his career, his game has most certainly evolved, and that's what anybody who's great at anything does.
Lots of stars evolve, man.
They refine their weak points, but a lot of them don't win 6 championships.
But now we're going back to that. One guy doesn't win a ring, man.
Well, then, do we want to talk about like individual accolades? I mean, I'm sure everybody's listening to this knows, about all that. So
it's up to you. I mean, they know he has rings too. It's up to you, whatever you like.
Mm-hmm. I mean, multiple scoring championships, defensive player of the year, finals MVP, all-star MVP. I mean, I think it's, again, common knowledge about the individual success, and it's a shame that that's used against him. But it is, so that's the deal.
Some of the things you brought up shouldn't even be there. I can get into that if you like, but let me give you at least the cover first. The second thing is, what you did was you listed his resume. Listing a resume doesn't mean that he is the number one NBA player of all time. And you're assuming that his resume is the top resume over everyone else's. I could find you star after star after star where I list their resumes and I go, this guy won this award, he led a category this many times, he has this many rings. There's more examples, but you get the point. So the point is, there are other stars who have just as nice of a resume, or maybe they have a better resume.
Here's an example.
Okay, so for example, here's a resume for you. What if I told you there was a guy out there who has the most records of all time in the NBA? That's a resume.
The most records of all time. So most individual accomplishments, something that you just derided Michael Jordan for and invalidated his claim to greatness?
I never derided from him. I'm just questioning, for example, finals MVPs. That's not a record that he got himself. That's something they vote for. A guy who has the most records, there's no voting, there's no award, there's no NBA getting involved. It's just a guy who did it. So, for example,
are you a Wilt Chamberlain guy?
I definitely think he was better than Michael Jordan.
Nice, I love it. Because on that front, I will give you that Chamberlain, changed the game more than Jordan as an individual. How about that? I'll give you that.
I got no issue with that. But he was just one example. There's lots of stars out there who have how they go, Michael Jordan won this award. Well, lots of players win an award. Michael Jordan led the league in certain categories. So did other players. Michael Jordan he was the only guy to win this award, and this award in the same season. There are other guys who did things like that. And there are more examples, but you get the point. The point is, you guys take his resume and then you assume that his resume is the number one resume. There are other guys who have a resume just as good as Michael Jordan's or even better than Michael Jordan's.
Good point. I like the Wilt Chamberlain argument. I'll give you that one too. Here, can we move on to another idea?
Please, man. I hope you don't mind. I'm just addressing your points.
No, I love it. This is great. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
So I mentioned, his timing and arrival in the NBA in terms of the players that were there and kind of where the NBA was. Also, his time, not initially when he got there, but as his career went on, media changed. So you had more people consuming his games than ever before. The internet gets popular in the mid to late 90s. You got access to watch these games. I think it's easy and lazy in a lot of cases for people to assert that Michael Jordan is the greatest player ever without ever studied David Thompson. I keep going back to him for his athleticism, his scoring prowess, individually very successful player. I think that not only the timing of the progression of media involved in covering sports and the NBA in this particular instance had a lot to do with amplifying his success, but it also had as much to do with failures. And I would say that as a player in the modern era, being able to navigate the terrain of media and use it to his advantage and perform at the absolute highest level in the most critical games and scenarios during the time of heightened media has to count for something in regards to greatness.
When you say has to count to something when it comes to greatness, that's a broad thing, because if you're talking about the number one player of all time, that should not have anything to do with who is the number one NBA player of all time or which NBA star is better than another NBA star. It doesn't mean anything in terms of the game. So this guy is better than that guy. You shouldn't use something like media, fame, how he dealt with people on the outside, things like that. That has nothing to do with the game. Now, in terms of his greatness, yeah, sure, but that's a broad thing, and it's actually a different subject.
I respectfully disagree, because doing something in front of 10,000 people is a lot different than doing it in front of a worldwide audience, or even 60,000 people in an arena.
That's true, but every NBA player plays in the same places.
Well, not in every era. That's changed quite a bit, but I'll even give you that one. Let's say they all play in the same exact. Let's say they all play in a bubble. But it still takes so much mental fortitude, ability, any other intangible you can think of to have success individually and as a team, the way he did, that in my estimation exceeds all others.
Okay, so there's a couple of there's actually quite a few problems. So number one, you can't hold it against a guy for what his surroundings are. If somebody played at a certain time where there was no internet, you can't go, well, because you didn't have the same, media thing, we're going to hold it against you, because that means he's in a lose-lose situation. If he does well, you can go, well, hey, he didn't have to deal with the same media like Michael Jordan. And if he doesn't do well, you can go, well, hey, he didn't do well. So he can't win with you, and that's unfair. The second problem is, as I mentioned, there are other players who played at the same time, same places. So, for example, Magic Johnson played in Los Angeles. You can make the point that's the media capital of the world. Movie stars are there. A history of winning. In Los Angeles, they don't care about division conferences, banners, those kind of banners, and who won the most games necessarily. They care about finals. And this is a place where you have Dodgers, UCLA, USC. There's more examples, but you get the point. And there's just so many other things to do there. So you can make a point that they had that high stress there too. At number three, you also need to understand what Michael Jordan explained. He basically explained he doesn't think he would be able to deal with the Twitter world today, or that social media thing, if he was playing today. If that guy explains that he doesn't basically think he can deal with it if he was here today, then that's kind of going against your point about how he had to deal with so much then. And then again, the last thing, however he has to deal with the media, that should not have to do anything when it comes to who is the number one player of all time.
So, great points. I'd like to get back to the point about Magic Johnson, and I do think he's a great player. I think he's vastly underrated. He went from winning an NCAA championship to jumping right at the NBA, playing power forward in an NBA Finals game, absolutely dominating, winning a Finals his rookie season. So I'm with you to that level. But it's like when we talk about Jordan and his teammates, that's used against. It's almost a strike that I feel like you've used against Michael Jordan. But with Magic Johnson, do the same things not apply? Worthy, Kareem, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper. There's a litany of equal, players that had a lot to do with his success as well.
Okay, so I actually made a video on this. There's so many things wrong with this argument. And just for practicality, I'm not going to go through everything because it wouldn't be practical. And I want to give you time and be fair to you. But I'll give you some ideas. First of all, you can't hold it against somebody for who he has, because he's in a lose-lose situation. If he stays with the team, you can go, hey, he had a super team anyway, we're not going to count him. And if he doesn't have a nice team, hey, he didn't win, we're not going to count him. So he can't win with you no matter what he does. The second problem is, everybody needs a squad to win. The third problem is, if your point is, yeah, I know, they need a squad to win. Magic had a super duper squad. Well, you can make the point that Michael Jordan had a super duper squad because he had himself. Okay, so I don't have to go into detail. You already agree with that. Fine. And the proof is in the pudding, by the way. They won 6 rings, 2 three-peats, 72 games in the regular season wins. And according to Michael Jordan fans, they would have won 8 straight if he didn't supposedly leave for those 2 years, which never happened. He never left for 2 years. But anyway.
That's right.
And then the last thing is, I actually don't think those Showtime teams were as great as some of you guys think they were, because if you go through his roster, who he had him, James Worthy, Kareem. That's very normal to have three guys. After that, who does he have in his starting lineup that's so different from everyone else? Byron Scott, AC Green, Kurt Rambis, Michael Cooper. These are type of players who are like Horace Grant, BJ Armstrong, maybe Tony Kukoc. Actually, he might have been better. Will Purdue. These kind of guys, these are similar type of players. I don't understand why people act like Magic Johnson had like everyone's a Hall of Famer. And I actually want to point out something to you. In the late 80s, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was getting older. So it's not like he's 20 years old. And if you check his minutes and check his statistics, he wasn't putting up the same statistics. And you could make the point that Magic Johnson was what made that team kept going. Because even when Kareem left, he retired, Magic Johnson still went to the NBA Finals. I mean, just think if you play basketball, if you ever play with a point guard who's really good and he finds you, he makes the game so much easier for you and it's so much more fun. Now,
I 100% agree with that.
Now imagine it's not just any point guard. Now imagine it's Magic Johnson. If you ever play the highlights of Showtime, what do they do? So many times,
absolutely.
Magic will get the rebound, and everybody starts running down the court. You don't have to be that good because he's going to find you. He's setting up plays with like 20 seconds on the clock. They're setting up a play that fast. That's an incredible asset to have. That means basically you don't have to be that good. Just how many times have you seen a highlight where somebody gets the rebound, they pass it to Magic, and they just start running down the court? Because basically he's making everyone better. He makes people better, and then he can be your go-to guy to score, play every position. He's a clutch player, and there's more examples, but you get the point. The point is he really did a great job of making everyone better. Some people consider him the number one NBA team player of all time, and maybe he's the number one leader of all time.
Interesting. Well, I like that overall. I'm definitely not anti-Magic. Like I said, I don't think he gets enough credit. And actually, as an aside, I won't dig into this too deeply. I hate it when LeBron gets compared to Magic at any point.
A Michael Jordan fan brought up LeBron James.
In defense of Magic Johnson.
No, I know, but there's a joke that I have on my podcast. Whenever a Michael Jordan fan comes on, they bring up LeBron James. I use that joke because Michael Jordan fans have this thing where they always bring up LeBron James, and it's always in a negative way.
Well, I wasn't planning on doing that, but in terms of Magic, Magic's a singular player.
No, I hope it was a joke, you know. So.
No.
Go ahead.
That's totally cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. But in terms, what makes a great player? It's not just physical attributes. It's not championships. It's not individual success, right? I think we agree on that. You could just end the show right there. I'd love for you to write an article for the site, pick a topic, NBA really nice or otherwise. I love just the way you've analyzed and broken down your stance. You're upfront about how you feel, and it's all factually. And I'll make you a login to the site. You can write whenever you want. I'm serious about writing an article or 10 articles. I know it'll be good.
Hey, please subscribe. And if you disagree with me on something, you can go on my program and show me your facts on whatever you disagree on. If you want to go on, let's set it up. Send me an email. The email is right there in the description section. Thank you.